Another important thing to remember is to keep the onions well watered because they are full of liquid in the bulbs and they require a lot of water. The day has finally arrived and I'm going to be planting the onions. This is the last week of April and these onions have to go in the ground. They're already starting to bulb up. Look at this. They are ready to go in the ground. So I have here the red burgundy onions and the ruby red onions in the same container over here. And in these two, I have the yellow sweet Spanish onions. Whenever the planting season comes, I try to make a plan on paper so that I know where everything is going to go and I make sure that I have space for everything. However, in the plan, I had an accident. I did a big mistake. I have over here 4 rows of raised beds, and instead of drawing out 4 rows, I drew out 5 rows. Oops! So I ended up with one more row that I don't have here, and I planned as if I had one more row. So now I have to figure out how I'm going to be shifting all the things, and maybe I might have to remove some of the plants that I was going to plant in one of the beds and just maybe instead of planting 2 beds of that thing, I plant one of that thing. So on the plan, apparently I had an extra row down here, and but I don't have it. So this is where I planned on the onions to go, the yellow sweet Spanish onions. So I'm going to try to see if I can fit all these onions in this bed. If I can't, then I'm going to have to use one of my old beds over here and go ahead with the plan that I did over here, where I'm going to be planting the red burgundy onions in this bed over here at the bottom and some more yellow sweet Spanish onions in this bed. I think I ended up with more red onions than yellow onions, so I might actually have to plant the red onions over here and the yellow onions in the other beds, and I think that's probably what I'm going to do. I'm going to start with these onions first, with the red onions first, and then move on to the yellow onions, even though the yellow onions have bulbed up a lot more than the red onions, and I think that's only because the yellow onions have a lot more space in between, because a lower rate of yellow onions have germinated from the seeds, because this is the second year, and I probably should have put more seeds. I put 7 seeds in each cell. I probably should have put 10, but that's okay. I guess maybe I should have just went ahead and planted all the seeds that I have, because I think probably by next year they're going to be obsolete. I'm not going to be able to use them. I'll try to plant them anyways, see what I get from them. But I'm going to have to buy some more yellow sweet Spanish onions for next year. Seeds, I mean. Alright, so before I plant, I always go ahead and prepare the soil. I have some Biotone with me. I'm going to be using that over this entire bed that's behind me. And I'm going to scratch it into the soil. I have a hula hoe with me that allows me to do that. That makes the job a lot easier. I don't have to bend over and mix it all with my hands. I have this thing here to do it for me. I also have a cultivator, but I found this to be a lot easier to use because the cultivator doesn't seem to be able to scratch the surface in the early spring, because the surface kind of hardens up because of all the pressure from the snow on it. So this thing seems to do a better job than the cultivator during the early spring. Also, the benefit of this thing is if there are any weeds, it just takes care of them. It cuts the roots. I try to scratch it in a little bit deeper, about 1 to 2 inches into the soil, so that removes a lot of the roots of the plants, and usually around this time I have a pretty good crop of weeds. And this bed, however, I had it mounded up higher than I wanted to, so I took some of the soil and I used it to fill one of the beds that I was intending to fill. Didn't fill it all the way, but I think it's going to allow me to fill the rest of the beds with the soil that I have in the trailer. Alright, so let's go ahead and prepare the soil with biotone. I also did not mention I have some bone meal, and bone meal is going to be super helpful because alliums, which onions are in the family of alliums, alliums require a lot of nutrients, and the bone meal is going to help with that cell structure of the onion itself, and it's going to help it to build the starches into the bulb. And the biotone has all the basic elements that the onions are going to need. And I'm just going to sprinkle that over the surface and again scratch it with the hula hoop. So let's go ahead and get started. To take these onions out of their cell, I'm trying to carefully pull them up without ripping any of the neighboring onions next to them. And you can look at these roots. They look really healthy and they're not super overgrown. They are super moist because it has been raining for the whole week, and actually it just started raining right now. So I'm gonna have to gather my stuff and head inside and then come back here. Let's try this again. It just stopped raining. Yay, I get to plant some onions. So to separate them, you take the onion by the bulb and you gently pull apart. Don't be afraid if some of the roots rip out, because onions are pretty resilient, and also their roots are very wiry and they will pull apart pretty easily. You can see, look at that. So I'm just going to separate them from each other like that and place them and plant. See? It's super simple. It's not intimidating at all. There you go. And now most of the soil is going to be knocked out. That's totally fine. You are going to be planting them in soil, so you shouldn't worry about that at all. I'm going to put this aside, and I'm going to space them about between 4 to 6 inches apart. We'll start from here. I will also be putting irrigation in this bed, but for now we're just going to plant them, and later on I'll come back and put irrigation, because right now I am more concerned about getting things in the ground because I have a lot of things that I need to get in the ground. So I'm going to take a few cells and just lay them in this row and get planting. And now to plant these, you want to bury most of this bulb into the ground. So all this purple over here is going to go in the ground. I'm just gonna dig a small hole and put it in there. All the red onions are planted in this bed, and I believe that I will have space for 2 rows or at least 1 row of the yellow sweet Spanish onions, so I can fit those in here. Another important thing that you could do is to mulch the area where you have planted the onions. And that is going to prevent weeds from popping up, because onions do not like weed competition, because the weeds are going to take up all the nutrients and stop the onions from growing their bulbs, because onions are super heavy feeders. I have some hay, the same stuff that I used on the garlic bed. I will come back and put it over here, over this bed, after I set up the irrigation. I'm not going to do the irrigation today. I like to do it on a warm day because it's a lot easier to put the fittings in, the pipes and all that. Because when it's cold, everything is just super rigid and it's really hard to get it to fit together. Also, you might want to fertilize them halfway through the season, because again, they are heavy feeders, and that's going to allow them again to grow bigger bulbs for you. And if you don't have some mulch in the area where you have planted the onions, you want to make sure to continue to weed the area so that the weeds do not overtake the space and the onions struggle and do not get the nutrients that they need. And even if you do have mulch, you're still going to get some weeds pop in between the onions, because I mean, weeds just put themselves wherever they want and they tend to grow, but the mulch is going to help in suppressing the weeds by a lot. I only have the straw that has the seeds in it. I wish I can find the ones that do not have the seeds, so I do have to come and weed the area even after I put the straw down. It's not nearly as close as I would have to if I had nothing on over the beds. But the only tricky thing about using straw is that the grass, the wheatgrass that comes up from the straw or the barley, whatever it is very similar to the onion leaves and to the garlic, so sometimes I get it confused and I accidentally pull an onion or a garlic. So you just want to be careful with that if you do use straw that has the seeds in it. In the past, I also used to use the animal bedding. That's kind of like the fine wood shavings. You could also do that. I think I might want to get some this year as well and just use it over most of the vegetable beds. I'm not going to be able to cover everything because I do have a lot of beds in here. Right now I'm just going to continue to plant the rest of the onions. Another important thing to remember is to keep the onions well watered, because they are full of liquid in the bulbs and they require a lot of water, as well as the leaves also. When you kind of pop an onion leaf, it's very juicy and it kind of drips some liquid out of it. So you want to make sure to keep them well watered so that they can grow larger onions for you. One more thing that you can do to grow some bigger onions is to come halfway through the season, probably around the same time that you are going to amend them for the second time, and cut the greens off. You don't want to cut them too much down. You want to keep about 6 to 8 inches of the green stalks up, and that is going to allow them to produce some more leaves, and those leaves are going to produce some more layers in the onion bulb, and that also is going to give you some bigger bulbs. And I actually did a video on that very specific thing and all the different ways to preserve onion tops and how to use them, and I will be linking that video right here for you to watch. I want to thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you again next time. Bye.